Okay, folks, let's start this quest. Let's get our sword and sorcery on. Let's go on a Dungeons and Dragons type adventure to discover the top 40 fantasy series of all time. On this quest, I don't care what character you play, but I'm going to be the cleric here. I will be able to magically heal all of your hurt feelings when you don't agree with any of the books or series on my list, but that's okay. It's not debatable. We had a top 30 science fiction novels of all time. That one was debatable. This one is going to be set in stone. I'm telling you, my opinion is rock solid on these things. By way of introduction, I am Brian Lee Durfee, the author of The Forgetting Moon, published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press, also Blackest Heart, The Lonesome Crown. There's horses in my novel with glowing red eyes, and it pleases me to no end that that horse right there has glowing red eyes. I'm just saying, sometimes miracles happen. I am the cleric. Let's get to it. Top 40, let's start with the number 41, since we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons and Quests. One of the most popular books that's come out recently is just about a band of adventurers. That is funny book, and it is all a spoof. Not really a spoof, but just kind of a funny take on Dungeons and Dragons. And that is Nicholas Ames' Kings of the Wild. I wanted to give that a good shout out as one of the best new fantasies to debut in years. Number 39. We're going to rush through these because I don't want this video to be too long. I'm not going to critique every book. I will do critiques. I do book reviews on this channel, and you can, click on the links. And I just showed you number 39. Let's talk about it. Brent Weeks' Way of Shadows series. One of the better debuts also, but this was about 10 years ago it came out. A great series. You can click on the links to some of my other book reviews, and some of these books I do review in depth. Number 38. Probably one of the more controversial books to come out in the last 10 years because it's so dark, it's so disturbing, but that's Mark Lawrence's grim dark novel, The Prince of Thorns. Number 38 on my list of top 10 series of all time. Let's put some diversity in the group. J.V. Jones, she wrote a fantastic coming-of-age book series called The Baker's Boy in the early 90s. I read it when I was a younger guy, and I just thought it was fantastic. And look at that great Darrell K. Sweet cover. He did, if you're not familiar with Darrell K. Sweet, he did all of the Wheel of Time covers, and J.V. Jones did a great job with her series. My number 36 greatest fantasy series of all time is the Armageddon Reef series by David Weber. Get these, they're real good. They're really good, really good. He's also in my top 30 science fiction novelists of all time. Oh, a legend. The book is actually called Legend, and the series is the Legend series by David Gemmell. One of the greatest series ever written. You will love it. Forgive me if I mispronounce everything about this next book and the person who wrote its name. But this is a fantastic series. The Last of the Renshai by Mickey Zucker Reichert, published by Daw Books. It's very Norse mythology, very good, very bloody, very fun, great characters. One of the newer, bigger hits that's come out in the last 2 years is V.E. Schwab's A Darker Shade of Magic series. Very good, very good. Red London. Oh, one of the series I loved as a kid. I loved these when I was a kid. I just thought they were fantastic. One of my favorite series as a kid. A lot of this stuff, it's all sword and sorcery stuff, but one of the greatest sword and sorcery novelists of all time. Dennis McKiernan's The Dark Tide series. The Dark Tide, The Iron Tower. These were great books. I love these. The artist that did this cover went on to be the main artist for the Lord of the Rings films. He is a great artist. Great books. One of the authors, there's 2 authors that I've got here that have 2 series in my list of top 40. The first one is Stephen Donaldson, Mirror of Her Dreams. This is a duology. It is a great fantasy series if you want to read Start with Stephen Donaldson. Do this one. He's also got another series that makes my top 40 list. We'll get to that later. The second author that has 2 books. We'll just get right to it. We'll just get right to the guys that have 2 series that made my list, and that is Tad Williams' Shadow March series. Look at that beautiful Michael Whelan painting. Look at that. Number 30. Made number 30. He's also on the list later. You'll see one of his other series. Oh, classic. Classic is coming up. A classic. Everybody loves this, that loves grimdark. Grimdark fantasy. One of the masters of grimdark fantasy. One of the masters of sentence structure and beautiful writing. Gene Wolfe's Shadow Torturer series. A Don Mates cover. That's a Don Mates cover. I'm also going to critique some of the covers here too, because I think they're all beautiful. All beautiful. This series, it's not really written by one person. It's actually a collaboration between a lot of authors. There were about 14 books in this series, and I started reading them when I was just in junior high, and they're pretty dark. They're not for junior high school kids, but I still loved it. Thieves World from the 1980s. Thieves World, everybody remembers Hans Shadowspawn from Thieves World. Yes, what a great series. Let's go back to C.S. Friedman. She made my top science fiction novels of all time also. My top 30 science fiction. C.S. Friedman is one of the greatest writers of all time. She writes like Frank Herbert. If you like Frank Herbert's writing, you will like hers. Again, I'm going to mispronounce the title of this book. I won't mispronounce the author, but I'm going to mispronounce the title of this. But my number 26 greatest fantasy series of all time is The Chronicles of the Chelsea by Jennifer Robertson. Chronicles of the Chelsea. I don't know how to pronounce that. I've been, everybody's got the same problem. You read these fantasy books and you're just pronouncing it however you can. Shannara, Chelsea, I don't know what. Number 25. And keep in mind, Jennifer Robertson, now we have Melanie Ron. Melanie Ron's Dragon Prince series. It is amazing. I love these. Again, Michael Whelan painting is amazing. Pay attention to Jennifer Robertson and Melanie Ron. Also pay attention to Kate Elliott's Dragon series. Let me see. It was The Crown of Stars. Kate Elliott's Crown of Stars series. 7 books. They're all fantastic. And that Jody Lee painting, that's great. Pay attention to Melanie Ron, Jennifer Robertson, and Kate Elliott, because my number 23 book on this list is a collaboration between those 3 women. They wrote a book together, and it was called The Golden Key. It's a standalone, one of the only standalones I have here, but written by 3 wonderfully talented female authors. The Golden Key, again, illustrated by Michael Whelan. That guy on the cover actually looks like Michael Whelan now that I see that. But anyway, that's a collaboration right there. Great. Oh, I think you're all going to agree that this book needs to be on the list. This one is not debatable. This needs to be on the list somewhere. Michael Moorcock's Elric Saga. Number 22, Michael Moorcock's Elric Saga. I mean, this is a classic. And it's fun. It's just classic fun. Oh, I loved these books as a kid, and I loved these books as a college student. And this woman has actually, in the beginning of my writing career, this woman actually helped me a little bit. So I have to give her a shout out. Catherine, but I apologize to her in advance. This is another one I might mispronounce. But Catherine Kurtz, Dirony Rising series. There's about 12 books in the Dirony series, and I love them. If you love, old-timey, old English, archaic, magic, man, that's the series for you. Now, this next one is probably my favorite series that's come out within the last few years, and I loved everything about it. Number 20, my book number 20 on the list, Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. He's an Australian writer. These books are fantastic. Now, they are very R-rated. You do not want to let your 5-year-old read these. You do not want to put your toddlers to sleep reading this book. It will traumatize them. Traumatize them. Another great series. Every time I've got these sitting here, and as I pull them up, it's like they're getting better and better. And I can't believe how many series I've read. We're only to number 19, and we're already at authors and series that are classics that are just amazing. And let me just get to it. It's Robin Hobb's Assassin's Apprentice series. Everything that she did was great, but I love this series. And again, another Michael Whelan painting that just sells it. It's beautiful painting, beautiful painting. Oh, if you like assassins and thieves and you like witty characters, if you like Kings of the Wild, if you like that kind of thing, this guy's been writing a series of books since the mid-'80s that I have been following, and it's the Vlad Taltos Jerrig. Oh yeah, they're great. They are great. Stephen Hickman did that cover, and it is a fantastic cover. Stephen Brust, his Vladimir Taltos series, which this is book number 1 of, and there's a bunch of them. Wonderfully written, wonderfully written. You'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. Oh, now we're going to get into kind of some young adult stuff. Yeah, I read young adult stuff. I was once a young adult, and there were books in the 80s when I was a young adult that were fantasy books. It's not always Harry Potter. It's not always Harry Potter, I'm telling you. But there was Lloyd Alexander's The Book of Three, The Black Cauldron, The High King, Tyrande Ronderer, Castle of Lear. These are great, and I love that old painting too. That old painting is beautiful. The Book of Three, Lloyd Alexander, Tyrande. Oh, just fantastic. Another series that I loved when I was a kid is coming up. And number 16, one of my favorite numbers, Dragonlance, Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Yeah, this was the funnest thing to read when I was a kid. I read these things over and over and over and over. And that Larry Elmore cover, oh my gosh, they just don't paint him like that anymore. They don't paint him like that anymore. Larry Elmore, you are my hero, my absolute hero. Now let's get to a young adult series that I read when I was an actual adult. And I thought it was fantastically written. And guess what? It went on to sell 1 billion copies, and the author is like a billionaire. A billionaire. I bet you can't even guess, but I'm going to hold up Harry Potter. Number 15, best, greatest fantasy series ever written, Harry Potter. I thought it was well written. I thought it was well done. I thought it was great. This is another standalone novel that's coming up right now. It's not part of a series, it's a standalone, but the author writes all standalones, and they're all great. They're all genius. And that is Guy Gavriel Kay, Tigana. Read it. It's a piece of literary fiction set in a fantasy world. You will love it. Absolutely love it. It's a classic. Another classic, another old-timey classic from the 80s. We're going to go back in time again to when I was a kid, and I would read fantasy novels, and I would just it would be the best time of my life. And one of those fantasy series was Raymond Feist's Magician's Apprentice. Love Raymond Feist. Loved this series. Loved it. Loved it. I still have it all. These are old 1980s covers. 1980s covers. You can't beat them. Another book that's got a great 1980s cover by Darrell K. Sweet. That was a classic novel in the 70s. I read it in the 80s when I was a kid. Number 12 on the list. And this guy's already had a book on my list. It was back in the 30s somewhere. I don't remember, 33, 34, something. But now he's up number 12 with his second series in my top 40. And that's Stephen Donaldson, Lord Falsbane. Look at that Darrell K. Sweet cover. Doesn't that pop? Doesn't that just like scream 1980s fantasy? Oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Speaking of 1980s fantasy that was fantastic, I think this guy's one of the best writers in the world. Now, you read his books, no characters ever die. It's not grimdark like Mark Lawrence. It's not like that. It's not grimdark like George R.R. Martin or Steven Erikson. But this is The Pawn of Prophecy by David Eddings. Yeah, spoiler alert, nobody dies. It's a happy, fluffy, nice fantasy. Well written, though. Fantastically written. This guy's a great writer. Number 10. Let's get the top 10 started off in high fashion. My own book, The Forgetting Moon. Did you think I would leave it off the list? Seriously. Go buy it. It was the number 2 best-selling Audible book in the world in July, even beating out the Michelle Obama biography. That's how good it is. That's how many people love it. Self-promotional plug over. The Lies of Locke Lamore by Scott Lynch. Oh my gosh. I read this about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, and it was the freshest, newest fantasy of the time. And it is a delight. It's an absolute delight. If you read Locke Lamore, you can't do any better. Well, actually, you can do better. I'm going to show you some better ones, but that's great anyway. Oh my gosh. This book, this series, man, if you're reading it, pay attention to every word because you're going to get lost. Because this is a dense series, but people love it. I love it. I study the way this guy writes because he writes fantastic. That's Steven Erikson's Gardens of the Moon, Malazan, Book of the Fallen. If you read this series, it's 10, 12, 13 books long now. And man, it is grim. It is gritty. The characters are fantastic. And you can't look away because if you do look away, you're lost. You lose track of the story. Oh, so this book, I got to tell you, I'm going to be honest right now. Honesty time. When I first read this book, I read it when it came out. It was a big book when it came out. I read it and I was kind of like, I don't know if I really liked that. But I could tell the writing was great. The guy could write. The guy could really write. And I said, I'm going to give that another chance. I'm going to give that another shot, right? So a couple of years later, I picked it up again and it became one of my top 10 favorite books of all time. And it's a series now, and he's taken 10 years between each book. We all know him. Pat Rothfuss, Name of the Wind. Yeah, great writing. I love these 2 books. I can't wait for the 3rd book, just like the rest of y'all. I can't wait for the 3rd book. Now we're going to get to a guy who writes way fast. He writes just as big of books as Pat Rothfuss, but he writes them like way fast. And this guy's a genius. This guy's an absolute fantasy master genius. And that's Brandon Sanderson, Way of Kings. I've read these 3 books that are out now, and the 4th one's coming out this year. I've read these things 3 times each, and I'm telling you, I am in awe of his world building and his storytelling chops. And I tell you, that is just fantastic. Now, top 5 now. We're at the top 5. We're getting to the end. I hope I've counted them down correctly. I'm not a math person. I hope I've got them all right. That's why I've given myself these little numbers right here, because I would have forgotten that the Sword of Shannara was number 5 if it wasn't written right there. This is the first fantasy book that I read that got me jazzed about fantasy and wanted me to write my own books. I'm telling you, I have a special place in my heart for this series, and The Sword of Shannara is the best book in the series, and it will always be the best book in the series, and I will always love it, and it will always be in my top 5 because I was inspired by it to write my own fantasy series. Number 4, we're getting down there. We're getting down closer to the end. We're getting to where it gets real nitty-gritty. And this fantasy series is also a long fantasy series, but it's one of the most popular. And it's one of the most brilliantly written, and you will recognize it immediately. Eye of the World, Wheel of Time. I love it. I love everything about it. It's written beautifully. I thought Brandon Sanderson, who did Way of Kings that I just showed you, I thought, whoa, it's backwards. Let me do that. I thought that Brandon Sanderson finished up the series perfectly when Robert Jordan unfortunately passed away and couldn't finish it. Wheel of Time, great. My top 3. We'll get to my top 3 now. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, man. When I was writing The Forgetting Moon, I studied everything about this book. I studied everything about that. And if you want to know how much I studied it, I've got a video, one of my writing advice videos where I talk about how I studied this book to write this. George R.R. Martin he's a great writer. He does everything absolutely magnificently in this book. And we've all seen the show. We all read the books. We all know what we're talking about here. Now, my second favorite series of all time might be a shock to some of you. But he's probably my second favorite writer of all time after Stephen King. But that's Tad Williams' Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. This is the first book in the series, The Dragonbone Chair. And look again, another great Michael Whelan painting. I adore everything about this series. It is beautifully written. If you want to read a fantasy series that is the words, the sentences, the paragraphs are just poetic, Tad Williams is one of the best writers on the planet, if not the best. #1 fantasy series of all time. I don't know if you're going to be able to guess this one. I don't know. But let me show it to you. #1. #1. I even had to put a #1 thing there so I didn't forget that it was #1. But you got it. J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. Classic. There is nothing better. There's nothing better in fantasy than J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. You can try to debate me about that in the comments, but I will crush you in that debate. I will crush you because everybody needs to read The Lord of the Rings because it is the #1 fantasy series of all time.